Raman enjoyed much greater popularity in Assyria than in Babylonia, for there he exorcised the functions of a second Ashur, and was regarded as destruction personified, says an old Assyrian hymn concerning Raman. The mighty mountain, thou hast overwhelmed it, referring to the mountain pit, at his anger, at his strength, at his roaring, at his thundering. The gods of heaven ascend to the sky. The gods of the earth ascend to the earth. Into the horizon of heaven they enter. Into the zenith of heaven they make their way. What a picture we have here, in these few simple lines of a pantheon, in dread and terror of the wrath and violence of one of its number. We can almost behold the divine fugitives crowding in flight, some into the upper regions of the air, to outsoar the anger of the destroyer, with others seeking the recesses of the earth, to hide themselves from the fierceness of his countenance, the roar of his thunderbolt, and the arrows of his lightning. Simple and almost bald as these lines are, they possess marvelous pictorial quality, bringing before us, as they do, the full root of a whole heaven in a few simple words. I must say Raman is very similar to Humbaba. The weapons of Raman are lightning, deluge, hunger and death, and woe to the nation upon whom he visits his wrath, for upon it he visits flood and famine. Thus his attributes as a storm god are brought into play when he figures as a war deity. For just as a weather god of the lightning wields it as a spear or dart in the fight, so Raman as the storm god brings to bear the horrors of the tempest upon the demoted head of the enemy. Very similar to the teraphim, the clay statues were created and then ritually broken. So highly did the Assyrian kings value the assistance of Raman that they sacrificed to him during the stress and bustle of a campaign in the field. A god of agriculture, fertilizing the field. They liken an attack of their troops to his onslaught, and if they wish to depict the stamping out of an adversary, his eating up, as when the Shaka Zulus were wanton to term the process. They declare that their men swept over the enemy as Raman might have done. Ashur Nazir Pal alludes to Raman as the mightiest of the gods, but as in reality that phrase was employed in connection with all principal deities at one time or another, by the kings and priests who favored them. There is no reason to support that anything more is intended than that Raman occupied a place of importance in the Assyrian pantheon. The worship of Raman in later times came very much into prominence. It was only in the days of Hammurabi that he came into his kingdom, as it were, and even then his worship was not very firmly established in Babylonia. With the rise of the Kassite dynasty, however, we find him coming more into favor, and his name bestowed upon Babylonian kings. He seems to have formed a triad with Sin, Lord Zu, and Shamash. Zu, the red clay, the god of wisdom, and his devoted curse, the great smiter. In Egypt that would be Ra-Apep and Tehut, formerly the lion of protection, Shesmu, this being almost identical to the rise of the Hyksos. The Hymn of Hammurabi. We find Raman appealed to, along with Shamash, as the divine lords of justice, and Nebuchadnezzar also appears to have held him in high esteem, although he was unfriendly to the dynasty that first brought him into prominence, and this monarch couples him with Ishtar, the mountain pit of destruction, which of course confirms my translation, with Ishtar as the divinity who has chiefly assisted him in all his great undertakings. Indeed, Nebuchadnezzar evinced much partiality for Raman, perhaps feeling that he must placate the especial god of those he had cast from power. He speaks of him as the Lord of the waters beneath the earth, and the rains from heaven. The place of Raman's origin seems obscure. Opinions appear to differ regarding the original seat of his worship, some authorities holding that it was in Muru, in southern Babylonia, and others say it is necessary to turn to Assyria for traces of his first worship. Humbaba, Pazuzu, Marduk would all predate Ashur and Ramon, and prior to those oracles it would be Lord Zu. The cult of Raman is found in Damascus, as far south as the plain of Israel, as John Milton says, Ramon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus, on the fertile banks of Abana and Farfar, lucid streams. He also, against the house of God, was bold. A leper once he lost, and gained a king, as his sottish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace, for one of Assyrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offerings, and adore the gods whom he had vanquished, hence by definition the dead gods. This later theory would make him of Aramaic origin, but his cult appears to have been very considerable as the antiquity of Assyria, and it may have been indigenous there. Moreover, the earliest mention of his worship is in the city of Ashur, as has been indicated. He was probably a storm god, or a thunder and lightning god, the aspects of the divine storm bird. But he was also associated with the sun god Shamash. But whatever he may have been in Babylonia, in Assyria he was certainly the thunder deity first and foremost. A Babylonian text of some antiquity contains a really fine hymn to Raman, which might be paraphrased as follows, omitting redundancies. O Lord Raman, thy name is great and glorious, Bull, Dumu, child of heaven, Imdu good, Lord of Ka, the bird man, companion of the Lord Ea. Lord Zu is the eagle, and the original oracle prior to Ea. He that rideth the great lion is thy name. Thy doth charm the land, and covers it like a garment. And Zu, the divine storm bird. Thy thunder even shakes the great mountain, Enlil. Zu became Mullil, who became Enlil. And when thou dost rumble, the mother Ninlil trembles. Now the next part is certainly related to Lord Zu. Said the Lord Enlil, addressing his son Raman, the One, O son, spirit of wisdom, Zu, with all-seeing eyes and high vision, full of knowledge as the Pleiades, may thy sonorous voice give forth its utterance. Go forth, go up, who can strive with thee? It's worth noting that Goetia means go lion. The Father is with thee, against the cunning foe. Thou art cunning, with wielding the hailstones, great and small. O, with thy right hand, destroy the enemy, and uproot him. Raman hearkened the words of his father, and took his way from the dwelling, that would be the mountain pit, his dwelling, the youthful lion, the spirit of counsel, the oracle. Enlil and his twin self, little Enlil, would be aspects of this storm. In later times, the Babylonian Ramman seems to have typified the reign of heaven in its beneficent as well as its fertilizing aspect. I'm quite sure that the battlefield was also fertilized with the rain of men. Not only did he irrigate the fields and fill the wells with water, he was also accountable for the dreadful tempests which sweep over Mesopotamia. Sometimes he was malevolent, causing thorns to grow instead of herbs. The people, if they regarded him in some measure as a fertilizing agent, also seem to have looked upon him as a destructive and lion-like deity, quite capable of desolating the countryside and eating up the land. His roar is typical of him, filling all hearts with affright as it does, and signifying famine and destruction. The angels are the lions of God, and the fallen angels are the roaring ones. We are told, but we don't listen. It is not strange that Mesopotamian regions should have so many deities of a destructive tendency, when we think of the furious whirlwinds, which frequently rush across the face of the land, raising sandstorms and devastating everything in their track. I salute you, Mr. Spence. He is indicating that this is Pazuzu, the dust demon who needed to be swept away, the god of the sand storm, the whirlwind, and the hurricane. In Re, the plan to remove, said of a storm. And in fact, Raman was likened to the roaring lion, seeking whatever he may devour, and this seems to have symbolized him in the eyes of the peasant population of the land. Indeed, the Assyrians, impressed by his destructive tendencies, made a war god of him. And like Pazuzu, they considered his presence as essential to victory. No wonder that the great god of storm made a good war god.